Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I was reborn in 1977, the very year the college entrance exam was reinstated. My mom wanted me to take my younger sister's place and marry a 35-year-old bachelor in town, a man who was crippled, poor, and ugly. But my sister stepped forward before I could respond and said she would marry him herself. That was when I realized she had been reborn too. In my previous life, I was the one forced to marry that poor, crippled man, David Walker. He became the first person in town to make 10,000 yuan. Riding the tide of economic reform, we went on to become millionaires in the 1980s, and later our fortune grew into the billions with children and grandchildren filling the house. Meanwhile, my sister Emily took my spot at college, went to the city, and married a high-ranking army officer. But that officer, Ryan Lewis, turned out to be a violent abuser. She was beaten every day. In the end, Ryan was seduced by an actress who tricked him out of money and affection, forcing him to steal. He died miserably in prison. I knew in this lifetime, Emily wanted to take my brilliant future for herself. What she didn't know was that David Walker was a greedy, lustful, gambling addict who owed all his success to me. And as for that prominent officer, sorry, I'm not marrying him either. Come on, Sarah, my mom said. Drink this soup. The air was freezing. When I opened my eyes, I saw a torn calendar with a portrait of a great leader hanging on the cracked mud wall. The date was December 29, 1977. I had been reborn. I would never forget this day, the day that changed my destiny. It was the first year the college entrance exam was restored, and it was the very next day after I had received my admission letter from the Department of Electronic Mechanics at Capital University. My mom carried a bowl of soup and pushed open the drafty wooden door. The sound of broken branches creaked outside as a gust of cold wind rushed in. My heart ached because I knew my own mother had slipped something into that soup. I would never forget what happened on this day in my previous life. The crippled and ugly bachelor, David Walker, had caught sight of Emily while collecting ration coupons and became obsessed with her. Carrying all his savings, 30 yuan, he insisted on marrying her. My mom, tempted by the money but unwilling to give up Emily, decided I would be the one to marry him instead. Clutching my admission letter, I fell to my knees, banging my head on the ground until it bled, begging her not to force me into that marriage. I promised I would study hard and make money to give them a good life. She kicked me aside, ripped the admission letter from my hands, and spat. I broke my back raising you. Don't think I'll waste more money sending you to school. You're marrying David Walker now. 30 yuan will give us a better life. That money will let me enjoy some peace, find Emily a good husband, and prepare her a fine dowry. That very day, a former urban youth stationed in our village came with another marriage proposal for a high-ranking officer in the city. He said the officer had fought on the battlefield, killed enemies, and was a pillar of the nation. Though from a powerful family, Ryan Lewis had some mental trauma from his missions, and was extremely picky, which was why he remained unmarried. His parents believed city girls were too delicate to tolerate his temper, and wanted a pretty rural girl who could take care of him. They even promised that his wife would be given the chance to study and attend college. The youth said to my mom, "Both of your daughters are beautiful. Pick the one who is more sensible." My mom thought this was like a pie falling from the sky. She immediately pushed Emily forward and then, without hesitation, drugged me so that David Walker could carry me off. After the deed was done, Emily took my place at Capital University and later married that officer, Colonel Ryan Lewis. Looking at the bowl of soup in front of me and at my mother, who had played favorites all my life, I said coldly, "I'm not drinking it." She lunged at me, trying to pinch my mouth open to force it down. "You're going to drink this," she shouted. My heart ached as I resisted. She slapped me hard. "Don't be so ungrateful." I grabbed her wrist mid-swing and glared at her. "Don't even think about ruining me again. I'm not getting married. I'm going to study." My mom, furious and humiliated, was about to start cursing when Emily suddenly rushed in, pulling her hand back before she could strike me again. "Mom, I'll marry him myself," Emily said. She shot me a quick sly glance. I knew then that she had been reborn as well. My mom couldn't believe what she had just heard. She had always favored Emily ever since we were children, and she didn't even bother to hide it. I stared at her and raised my voice. Emily, that's David Walker we're talking about. The most infamous old bachelor in town. Don't be stupid. Mom has already arranged another match for you, and it's a really good one. Emily glanced at me but said nothing. Only then did Mom lower her voice. The officer in the city, his last name is Lewis, Ryan Lewis. He lives in a big house, has power, money, and status. His family can even pay for your college education. You'll finish your degree, marry him, and spend the rest of your life without worries. The moment she heard Ryan Lewis's name, Emily's face turned red, then pale, her expression hard to read. She seemed afraid of falling into another trap and didn't want to talk about it. Mom, stop it, she said impatiently. Trust me. If I marry David Walker, I'll have a good life. Let Sarah marry Ryan Lewis instead. She gave me a gloating look just as David Walker came grinning at the door. Without a backward glance, Emily followed him out. My mom, furious, grabbed my admission letter and tore it to pieces. You're going to the city with Richard Lee now. Forget school. You'll marry the officer right away. Emily didn't land the golden turtle, so now only you're left, she snapped. She only wanted to get Ryan Lewis's bride price as quickly as possible. She threw the shredded admission letter into the clay stove and burned it to ashes. I knew at that moment I had no choice but to go to Ryan Lewis first. I needed his help to figure out a way to continue my education. That afternoon, without a shred of hesitation, I followed Richard Lee to the city. The first time I met Ryan Lewis was in his large house in the center of town. It was an ancestral home, a little old but grand and spacious. Richard and I stood in the middle of the living room when Ryan Lewis came in, tall, upright, and unsmiling. His sharp eyes stayed fixed on me for a long time before his tightly closed lips finally opened. Sarah Carter, he said simply. I nodded. Richard hurried forward to flatter him. Sarah's known in the village for being quick, sensible, and well-behaved. She's also very pretty, just not dressed up, and she's been studying secretly on her own. She even got into Capital University. She's smart, so her children won't be bad either. Ryan Lewis waved his hand impatiently at Richard. I'll handle your transfer to the city. Thank you for this, he glanced at me. Richard, being a smart man, realized it was time to leave. Then I'll trouble you, Colonel Lewis, he said quickly. I'll head back to the village now. Still have work to finish. Go on, Ryan said sternly. Left alone, I felt a strange fear as I prepared to make my request. But for the sake of my studies and my future after Richard left, I gathered my courage. Colonel Lewis, my admission letter to Capital University was burned by my mom. Could you help me? You're already making demands of me. Ryan Lewis's brows knit together, his gaze sharp. I fell silent immediately. In my previous life, I knew Emily had lived miserably with him. That so-called mental trauma he had wasn't just some vague wound. It was full-blown post-traumatic stress disorder from his missions. He couldn't stand being provoked. When he saw I wasn't speaking, his voice dropped low again. First of all, I have 3 conditions. 1, I can't stand a woman's crying or screaming. 2, I will meet all your material needs, but you can't expect anything from me emotionally. 3, you must accept that Claire, you and her son live in this house. Claire, you. I was stunned. She was a childhood friend of mine who had married my brother. My brother had died on a mission saving Ryan Lewis. Putting together what I had heard from Richard on the way, I instantly understood why Ryan's family was looking for a rural wife. No city girl from a well-matched family would accept these 3 conditions. This marriage arrangement was entirely decided by Ryan Lewis's elderly parents. He himself was unwilling because deep down he couldn't let go of Claire, but he was a devoted son and could only obey his parents' wishes. In my previous life, Emily hadn't wanted to study. She only wanted to marry Ryan Lewis as soon as possible. She dropped out of college before finishing her freshman year and married him. Neither she nor my mom ever mentioned the 3 conditions, but they must have accepted them privately. Still, they were deeply wary of Claire, afraid she might cause trouble later, which was why they were so eager to hurry the marriage. When Ryan mentioned Claire just now, a rare gentleness flashed in his eyes. But knowing Emily's personality, even if she married him, There was no way she could tolerate it. She and my mom cared too much about appearances. With her husband keeping his childhood sweetheart and her son under the same roof, how could they ever explain that to others? Outsiders only knew Ryan often beat her, but they never realized the chaos inside that home. At last, I understood everything clearly. This was the true reason Emily's marriage to Ryan had turned into such a disaster. As for me, I wasn't concerned about those 3 conditions. I had no intention of marrying Ryan Lewis, nor did I plan on spending the Lewis family's money. I smiled and said, "Con, I know this marriage was arranged by your parents. You probably feel reluctant, but you're a filial son who would never go against them. And your age has come." His eyes suddenly flickered with surprise. He hadn't expected me to speak to him so openly. "Colonel Lewis, if you're unwilling, we can delay things for now. By the time I graduate from college, maybe circumstances will change, and this marriage won't have to happen." He looked even more shocked. In his mind, any country girl who managed to latch onto him would cling desperately, thanking her luck. He hadn't expected that I would not even want to marry him. He didn't know that I had already lived one life before. In my previous life, though I never managed to finish college, I still reached dazzling heights. Having seen the world, I understood one truth well. A woman can only rely on herself. Husbands, sons, none of them can be counted on. I knew all too well what marriage was really like, what men were really like. Everyone back then said I was blessed, that I had married David Walker, the crippled bachelor no one else wanted, yet somehow turned my fate around. David had the fortune for wealth, knew how to do business, and made money, giving me a life of riches. But no one knew that it was I who had given David Walker that wealth and glory. He gambled recklessly and fell into debt. He demanded that I hand over my small stash of private savings. When I refused, he beat me, then tried to snatch my little radio to sell. That radio was the only valuable thing my father had secretly left to me before he died, hidden from Mom and Emily. In the struggle, the radio was smashed. With blood at the corner of my mouth, I wept as I clutched the broken radio. It was my only warmth in this world, my only connection to the outside. Late at night, under a kerosene lamp with swollen eyes, I painstakingly pieced the shattered radio back together. Unexpectedly, I actually managed to fix it. From childhood, I had been fascinated by electronics and mechanics, which was why I applied to study electronic mechanics at university. That was when I suddenly realized I could earn money this way. So I went door to door in town asking if anyone needed radios, TVs, or refrigerators repaired. At first, I fixed things for free, practicing my skills for several months. Then, I began charging small, modest fees. As more and more families bought appliances, my business grew steadily. When David saw that I had found a way to make money, and after I pressured him relentlessly, he slowly gave up gambling and began learning repair work from me. Our lives improved and his attitude toward me gradually softened as well. We started by fixing small household appliances for others, earning our very first pot of gold. We became the first family in town to make 10,000 yuan. Then, with the arrival of economic reform, we went to the city and opened an appliance repair shop, becoming millionaires in the 1980s. Later, we even founded our own appliance brand. We built a nationwide brand chain that grew into a Fortune 500 company with assets worth hundreds of billions. I gave David Walker 3 sons. But because raising children consumed so much of my time and energy, he persuaded me to step back into the role of a homemaker. For the sake of personally caring for my sons, I became a full-time housewife and slowly entrusted the business to him. Once he had risen from nothing to great success and gained full control of both business and wealth, David changed again. He began to despise me for being just a housewife without higher education, for being a woman from the countryside. After becoming a powerful boss, he chased women constantly, keeping company with pretty secretaries and entangling himself with ambitious women in business. The 3 sons I had raised with my own hands went abroad to study, saw the world, and came back eager to curry favor with David, so they could inherit more. They all began to look down on me, ashamed of my humble origins, claiming I was out of touch with society and embarrassing them. Even the grandchildren surrounded David, and some went so far as to flatter the women he kept outside. I lived a life that looked glamorous on the surface, But inside I was numb and broken. In the end, I died in depression. In this life, how could I still place my hopes on anyone else? How could I waste my gifts and talents only to hand everything over to someone else again? I only wanted to study well, to learn real skills, to take my destiny firmly into my own hands, and to live for my own value. Since Ryan Lewis was reluctant to marry me, and was only doing it to fulfill his parents' wishes, with Claire, you clearly being the woman he truly cherished, that suited me even better. I looked at Ryan Lewis and boldly spoke my thoughts. My admission letter was burned by my mom. If you're willing to help me, Colonel Lewis, and prove my acceptance to the school, as long as I can study, you'll have 4 years in which you don't have to marry me. You'll have time to consider other women. I believe your parents won't force us in the meantime. After listening, Ryan stepped closer, towering over me. Sarah Carter, are you trying to break off the engagement? Or is it that you can't accept those 3 conditions, so you're threatening me? He didn't allow me to explain, pressing further. Which one can't you accept, Claire? You? There's nothing between us. If you want to marry into the Lewis family, you'd better have a bigger heart. He kept pressing, his face dark with anger. I didn't understand why, and was still thinking about how to make myself clear when a crisp, delicate voice rang out behind me. Ryan. I turned and saw a stunningly beautiful woman in stylish clothes walking in with a radiant smile, holding the hand of a little boy. Her eyes were full of affection as she gazed at Ryan Lewis. Only after a long while did she glance at me, looking me up and down. Ryan's tough expression softened at her arrival. He said flatly, "This is Sarah Carter from the countryside." The woman's face flickered for a moment, but she quickly smoothed it over and smiled. She extended her hand to me. "Hello, I'm Claire." Ryan gently pulled her hand back. "She just came from the village, worked in the fields. Her hands are dirty." At that moment, the little boy ran into Ryan's lap. "Dad, Ryan, take Mom and me to the amusement park." Ryan answered at once, All right, let's go." The 3 of them left together. Before going, Ryan came over to me and said coldly, "What you suggested I won't consider. I won't call off the engagement, but we can wait until you graduate from college to get married. Tomorrow, I'll have someone at the school issue proof for you." Then he called out to the housekeeper, "Mrs. Wong, prepare a guest room for her." I secretly let out a breath of relief, though my chest still felt tight. At last, I could go to school. But what did he mean by refusing to break off the engagement? After running around all day, I was too exhausted to dwell on it. Originally, Richard Lee had said I would be living at the Lewis home from now on. With nowhere else to go and not a penny to my name, I could only stay here temporarily. When the school year began, I would move into the dormitory right away. Then I would find work outside, earn money, and repay Ryan Lewis for his help so we could settle the debt between us once and for all. I was admitted to college smoothly, and I was already planning to move out of the Lewis home. I hadn't expected Ryan Lewis to stop me. He firmly forbade me from leaving. "Colonel Lewis, I'm grateful that you helped me attend school. I'll remember this and repay the favor. As for the expenses from living here these past weeks, I'll work and pay you back," I told him. Ryan's lips curved slightly. "Sarah Carter, you can repay the household expenses with money, but getting you into college? Such a huge favor. How do you plan on paying that back?" I froze. He went on, "You're not allowed to move out. While you're living here, I'm off and away. You'll help take care of Claire, you and her son, for years. Otherwise, just as I made it possible for you to attend college, I can also ruin it for you. You know I have the power." So this was Ryan Lewis hitting straight at the heart. He wanted his fiancée, in name only, to serve his beloved woman and her son like a servant. No wonder, thinking back, with Emily's proud and combative nature, things had blown up the way they had in my previous life. But for me, it didn't matter. Being able to study was already the greatest gift. As long as I could repay Ryan's favor, working in his house like a maid under the title of fiancée was nothing. After thinking it over, I agreed. Ryan's furrowed brows seemed to relax a little, almost like muttering to himself. He said, "For years is enough." What I hadn't expected was that Claire wouldn't let me off so easily. After class, when I went out to work at the repair shop, I would come back only to be ordered around endlessly by her. Every night, without fail, she made me wash her and her son's feet. I endured it all the way until sophomore year. One day I had my period and terrible cramps. Claire ordered me around again, and I finally snapped. The waters boiled and were ready. "You can wash yourself," I said. The boy heard it and immediately kicked over the basin. "Bad woman. You're bullying my mom." Claire instantly pulled him into her arms and scolded me. "My son has grown up without a father. He's sensitive. You shouldn't speak that way in front of him and hurt him." I stared at her in disbelief, as if I had committed some unforgivable sin. I was about to argue when Ryan Lewis walked in. Claire's face instantly changed. She put on a pitiful look and said, "Ryan, I knew it. You asked her to take care of us, but she must hate us. That's why she deliberately made the water so hot and burned Henry. Don't trouble yourself with us anymore. We're widowed and alone, living under someone else's roof. We'll just move out tomorrow. I'll tell you myself." Hearing that and seeing the spilled basin, the water all over the floor, and little Henry crying, Ryan didn't ask a single question. He grabbed my arm and slapped me hard. "Sarah Carter, James Shaw died saving me. We owe it to his wife and son to take care of them. You're in college now and still don't understand gratitude. Even a child knows better. Don't be so cruel." I looked at him in shock. Claire held Henry in her arms, her face full of fragile grievance. But behind it, I caught a glimpse of smudged triumph. I covered my stinging cheek and glared at Ryan. Through gritted teeth I said, "Ryan Lewis, if anyone owes them, it's you. If anyone has a debt to repay, it's you. I owe you a favor, yes, but I have no obligation to let that woman and her son trample me. What right do you have to treat me like this?" Ryan's voice was ice. "Because you're my fiancé. A wife follows her husband no matter what, and marrying me is already far above your station. Taking care of my benefactor's wife and child? Do you call that being bullied? I didn't know you were so delicate." When Claire heard him call me his fiancé, her expression flickered. She nudged Henry lightly, and Henry immediately threw himself into Ryan's arms. "Mommy is Daddy Ryan's real fiancé. She's the bad woman," little Henry shouted. Claire hurried over, flustered, pulling Henry close as if to scold him, her face pretending embarrassment. Children speak without thinking. "Ryan, this boy is getting more and more out of hand. Who knows what's going on in his head?" She glanced at me, and though her words carried reproach, the smile tugging at her lips was full of triumph. Ryan Lewis let out a deep sigh, his eyes filled with pity as he looked at the mother and son. Then he turned, his face stern, and gave me a sharp glance before leaving without another word. I watched his retreating back and knew that in his heart he wished Claire you were his fiancée, but his parents would never allow it. And I was nothing more than the woman his parents forced him to marry. For the past 2 years, I had asked nothing of him. I had no desires, no quarrels, no fights. Only by keeping silent and never provoking him had I avoided ending up like Emily in the previous life, who had driven him to anger and suffered the consequences. But now, with Claire Yu and her son around, even the fragile peace I'd managed to maintain seemed doomed to collapse. Ryan's parents, who lived elsewhere, would occasionally come to visit me. They treated me kindly, but they had no idea I was planning to break off the engagement after 4 years. That knowledge gave me a sense of guilt. In those 2 years, my academic performance was outstanding, known across the entire school. I even represented the university in the National Electronics and Mechanics Skills Competition and won first prize, making me a modestly well-known figure nationwide. Ryan's parents grew increasingly fond of me. Still, I refused to use the Lewis family's money. My advisor, Professor Lee Monroe, saw how hard I was working to balance school and jobs outside, and he made an exception to include me in his master's and doctoral research projects so I could earn some extra income. There truly are good people in this world. That made me realize even more that I needed to move out of the Lewis home as soon as possible. Given my current standing with the school and my professors behind me, even Ryan Lewis wouldn't be able to block my education any longer. Just as I was nursing the sting of Ryan's slap and carefully planning my departure from the Lewis home, my mom and Emily showed up at the door. David Walker had gambled away everything they owned. When he wasn't gambling day and night, he He was drinking and beating Emily. At first, Emily had clung to the hope that he would follow in my footsteps, repair appliances, and strike it rich so she could sit back and enjoy wealth. Instead, all she saw was him stumbling home late every night, demanding she find ways to get money to pay his gambling debts. Eventually, after being beaten so badly, her face was black and blue. She fled back to the village, crying to my mom. She said David had threatened that if she didn't bring him money, he would kill her. My mom was heartbroken for Emily, but by then their family property had long been emptied. Then she remembered. Since I still hadn't married Ryan Lewis, the Lewis family's bride price hadn't been delivered. Out of fear of offending the Lewis family, she hadn't dared bring it up directly before. She had even sent people to ask me indirectly, but I only said I would marry after graduating college. She also approached Richard Lee, the matchmaker, dropping hints. Richard reassured her that the Lewis family was prominent and would never shortchange them, but that such matters had to follow proper etiquette and couldn't be rushed. Now, for Emily's sake, my mom could no longer hold back. She came straight to the Lewis home to demand it. When they arrived, Ryan came out politely to receive them. I, too, put aside my Cold War with him for the moment, and together we went out to meet them. Emily looked as though she had aged 10 years. Her expression was haggard, her face covered in bruises. Seeing me in the Lewis household, she realized that although my life didn't appear especially glamorous, it wasn't the chaotic mess of her previous life either. Compared to her own current state, I was doing immeasurably better. For reasons I didn't understand, Ryan even slipped his arm lightly around my waist, and Emily's face twisted with fury and resentment. The moment my mom sat down, she shamelessly spoke up. Colonel Lewis, aren't you planning to get married yet? My daughter has been living in your home all this time without a marriage certificate. No proper ceremony. Outsiders will gossip. Ryan looked at me, and just as I was about to answer, he took my hand instead. Mother-in-law, of course, will marry, but not now. I respect Sarah's wishes. She wants to finish college before we wed. My mom's words were cut off. Hearing that it was I who didn't want to marry yet, she pointed at my nose and began scolding. Shameless girl living together unmarried. Don't you care about your reputation? Don't you care what outsiders will say, pointing fingers and calling you dirty? Maybe it was just my imagination, but as Ryan listened to the endless stream of nasty insults, the look he turned on me flickered with a trace of pity. He drew his brow hard and barked, "She's to stay in the guest room. The Lewis household won't tolerate this vulgar, shameless cursing. If it continues, get out." My mom fell silent in fright. I looked at Ryan and felt a spark of gratitude. Emily, however, couldn't understand why Ryan showed me such closeness, respect, and protection. This wasn't the cold, violent man she'd known in the last life. To stir up trouble, she suddenly put on a sarcastic tone and said, "I heard the Lewis family is sheltering an orphan mother and son." That, of course, was something she knew from the last life. Ryan frowned and shot me a glance, thinking I must have been gossiping. His face darkened. "The Lewis family has no orphan mother and son, only the family's benefactor," he said through his teeth, then turned and spoke to me quietly. "Sarah, I have kept your dignity in front of your mother and sister, and yet you go outside and slander my family. It seems you really cannot stand Claire, you and Henry." His words reminded me of the blow he'd given me before for Claire and Henry's sake. The small gratitude I'd felt evaporated, and humiliation and anger surged up again. It wasn't me who said those things. "Believe it or not," I snapped. "If you can't tolerate your benefactor, I don't have that qualification." Colonel Lewis was supposed to part in 2 years anyway. He had never been publicly defied like that, and his neck veins bulged with anger, his fists clenched. He looked triumphantly vindicated. His provocation had worked. I hadn't planned to settle at the Lewis house permanently, so I didn't care either way. Emily pretended to be affectionate, came over, and gripped my hand, calling out to Ryan, "Brother-in-law, my sister is timid, but clever and stubborn. Please be indulgent with her." Ryan swept his sleeves and left. Seeing him go, my mother, who still hadn't gotten any money and didn't understand the situation, lunged at me, grabbed my collar, and dragged me. "You're the one who angered Colonel Lewis. Give some money to your sister to hand to David, she demanded. I stared coldly at her. Why should I give you anything? Just because you gave birth to me and raised me? I tore your hand off, and you raised me. I was raised by Dad when I was little. After he died, I supported the family. The clothes we ate and wore. Which of those didn't I earn by working? From childhood until now, the money I earned was taken by you to give to Emily. When I was 10, you gave my winter coat to Emily and left me in a broken jacket for winter. Emily had some allergic rash, and you blamed me for sabotaging the clothes, then beat me nearly to death. You don't remember any of that. Now consider this official notice. We are cutting ties. You can fend for yourselves. When my mother heard that she could no longer get anything from me and dared not take it out on the Lewis family, she collapsed into shrieking sobs on the floor, screaming that I was an unfilial daughter, that I'd grown wings and climbed a high branch and forgotten my nursing breasts, cursing that I'd get my comeuppance. Just like Emily in the last life, she only saw Ryan's temper and didn't understand his PTSD, that he could not stand women's screams or wails. My outburst had pushed him over the edge. Hearing the commotion made him furious. He summoned the servants, drove my mother and Emily out, and ordered them guarded so they would never set foot in the Lewis house again. Before Emily left, she ranted hysterically at me. Sarah, what trick did you pull? Why is Ryan defending you? Why are you saying David Walker is a worthless gambling bum? I only smiled. Emily, you can't pin your life on anyone else. Emily was crying and wouldn't stop. But aren't you depending on Ryan Lewis? Depending on the Lewis family? Just wait and see. Your life won't be any better than mine. I shook my head. I won't depend on anyone. I'll be fine. Then I turned and closed the door. In the city, they had nowhere to turn. With no one to rely on, they had no choice but to return to the village. I went back to the guest room in the backyard to continue packing my things. Passing by Claire's room, I overheard her comforting Ryan. Ryan, don't be angry. Country people are always greedy and shameless. They don't know manners or dignity. At critical moments, they're nothing but mud, dirtying themselves and others. Here, I made your favorite osmanthus honey tendon. Eat some to calm down. In her words, country people clearly included me. Ryan let out a heavy sigh but didn't speak. In front of Claire, he never once defended me. Instead, he just said, Claire, you're always so sensible, educated, and understanding. I smiled bitterly. Truly, the two of them were well matched. May they live happily together for 100 years. Quickening my steps, I returned to my room. Tomorrow, I would finally move out of the Lewis household and into the school dormitory. It wasn't until a week later that Ryan realized I was gone. He came to the university, and I had just walked out of my professional course when the gate guard called me, saying someone was waiting outside. I stepped out and saw him leaning against a military green Jeep parked at the entrance. When he spotted me, he stubbed out his cigarette and walked toward me in long strides. Come back with me, he said. I shook my head. No need. You promised me you'd take care of Claire and Henry for 4 years. I shook my head again. I'll find another way to repay your favor, but I won't take care of them. There are so many servants in your house. Why must you use them to torment me? I looked straight at him, never understanding. His lips moved as if to speak, but he swallowed the words back down. I spoke seriously. If you truly like her, you could try talking to Mr. and Mrs. Lewis. Fight for your own happiness. There's no need to torture yourself and others like this. That's my honest advice. But he grew furious. How many times have I said it? Claire and her son are the wife and child of my family's benefactor. It's only right that we treat them well. I looked at him deeply. Everything you do for her. Is it really just gratitude? Or are you using it as an excuse to indulge your own feelings? His face flushed red with anger. He pointed at me. You may have come from the countryside, but you're receiving higher education now. Why is your heart still as narrow as a village woman's? I found his words absurd. For the first time, I called him by his full name, meeting him on equal ground, and replied firmly, Ryan Lewis. First of all, I have no interest in you, so it's not a matter of being jealous of Claire. Second, yes, I came from the countryside, but country people are still people. There are good and bad ones, just like in the city. You don't need to keep insulting me with the word country. Lastly, maybe I'm not accomplished, but at least I'm honest. I know what I want and what I don't. Unlike you, who says one thing while feeling another, lying to yourself and tormenting others. Ryan Lewis, a man can't be so greedy. You can't have it all. After saying all that, I expected him to explode in rage. But instead his clenched fist slowly loosened. His cold face under the early spring sunlight revealed a trace of unexpected defeat. After a long pause he finally called my name, his voice soft. Sarah, you really never once considered marrying me? Ryan asked. I hesitated for a few seconds, then lifted my head to look at him. His expression seemed even dimmer, and when his hand suddenly gripped my arm hard enough to hurt, I tried to pull away. Never, I said, shaking my head. I haven't. Don't you dare say never again, he roared. I had never seen Ryan's eyes look so desperate yet so fierce. For a moment, I was shaken, almost believing he might truly care about me. But I immediately crushed that ridiculous thought. Impossible. The tenderness he showed Claire, I had never once seen directed at me. The spring scenery along the roadside was lovely, but the seasons always turned. I still had so much to do in my life. I extinguished the faint, foolish spark in my heart. Ryan continued finding excuses to come to campus to see me, though his words never strayed far from Claire. I avoided him whenever I could, not wanting too much contact. The favor of helping me into college and the guilt of planning to break the engagement, I repaid through his parents. I knew Ryan was busy, and with Claire living in the Lewis household, the widow and child of his brother-in-arms who had died saving him, his parents couldn't say much aloud, but in their hearts, they disliked how close Ryan was to them. Rather than return to the Lewis house, they chose to live alone, even if it meant loneliness. So, with the money I earned from my part-time jobs, I often bought them valuable gifts. Whenever I had free time, I visited to watch TV, play chess, and chat with them. They were always pleased, and I was grateful to feel like part of their family. Near my senior year, Mr. Lewis turned 50. He invited me back for a family meal. I was touched that he saw me as family, so I spent all my savings from part-time work to buy him a proper birthday gift. Carrying the present, I returned to the Lewis home. I helped Mrs. Wong in the kitchen making sweet and sour ribs, Mrs. Lewis's favorite. Meanwhile, Claire sat with them in the living room, chatting and pushing Henry toward them, coaxing him to call Grandpa and Grandma over and over, trying to win their affection. The Lewises were polite enough to respond. But during the meal, Mrs. Lewis kept praising my cooking, saying it suited her taste perfectly. Suddenly, Claire gave a dramatic cry. Ah, there's a cockroach in the sweet and sour ribs. In that instant, I understood why Henry, who almost never came into the kitchen, had been darting in and out earlier. The cockroach was planted. Claire had ordered her son to do it. Ryan frowned and turned to me with reproach. Today is my mother's birthday, and you insisted on cooking. This is the result. Claire immediately stood up, whisked the dish away, and put on her good person act. Ryan, Sarah worked hard all evening. Don't blame her. Even if it wasn't perfect, she still put in the effort. I let out a cold laugh, a staged play, pretending to be the good one. Ryan slammed his chopsticks on the table with a loud crack. Sarah Carter, why do you always say disgraceful things and do disgraceful acts? I drew a deep breath, ready to defend myself when Mrs. Lewis looked around at Claire, at Henry, who was bowing his head guilty at her son, then at me. Understanding flashed in her eyes. She scolded Ryan. Why are you yelling at Sarah? If you think it's so easy, then go cook yourself. Stop bullying her at the table. I had planned to bring up breaking the engagement after a few more days, not to ruin Mrs. Lewis's birthday, but Ryan wouldn't let go. Claire was right. In the end, you're nothing but mud from the countryside, he said. Now, not only did he refuse to defend me, he stood beside Claire and insulted me the same way. Since he despised me so much, I no longer had any reason to stay bound to him. I set my chopsticks down and stood. Bowing deeply to Mr. and Mrs. Lewis, I said, "Thank you for your kindness. Without you, I never would have entered the city." Then I turned to Ryan. "And thank you, Colonel Lewis, for helping me prove my admission and letting me attend college." I looked at him deeply, thought for a moment, then said, "The best way I can repay your favor is not to marry you, so that you and the one you love can truly be together." Then I turned back to Mr. and Mrs. Lewis and made my request. "Uncle Auntie," I said, bowing deeply, "I formally ask you to let me and Ryan Lewis dissolve our engagement. I will always be willing to remain like half a daughter to you. But in this life, it's my loss that I am not destined to be your daughter-in-law. I hope you can grant me this freedom." Mr. and Mrs. Lewis were stunned on the spot. Ryan had never before been so humiliated in public. He gave a cold laugh. "Fine, let's dissolve it now. I'll marry Claire." Then he turned and stormed away from the table in anger. At the banquet, the corners of Claire's mouth lifted with a trace of barely hidden joy. As I was leaving the Lewis home, I overheard his parents scolding him. "A fine, virtuous girl, and you reject her just to tangle yourself with a widow and her child. Unfill your son. Are you out of your mind? You're shameless. You disregard the Lewis family's reputation, but we still care about our face. Where do you expect us to put our dignity?" I understood then that the fondness Ryan's parents had shown me wasn't truly for me as a person. It was only because at that moment, I was the most suitable daughter-in-law they could settle for. If our positions were reversed, they would have preferred Claire all along. But having lived once already, I no longer demanded too much of human nature. Everyone acts in their own interest. There's nothing strange about it. All I could do was stay true to myself. A month later, as the sole graduating candidate from Capital University, I signed a confidentiality agreement with the nation's top-secret aerospace research project and set out for the Southern Research Base. From that day on, I disappeared from Beijing. By the time Ryan scoured the city and still couldn't find me, I was already at the Southern Base in the training camp for manned rocket research. Professor Lee Monroe later told me Ryan had gone to him, begging for news of my whereabouts. All he said was that I had gone south. I didn't know how Ryan managed to discover the base's location, but he barged in regardless. Security apprehended him, and only after verifying his identity and alarming the base leadership was he spared punishment for intruding on a classified site. He was ordered to return to Beijing immediately. When I was 35, our nation's first experimental spacecraft launched. The entire country celebrated with pride, and I was one of the 3 core technical leads of that historic manned spaceflight project. Watching the rocket soar into the sky and into the boundless universe, I knew with certainty that this was the true value and choice of my life. Professor Lee called to congratulate me. He also mentioned Ryan. He said that in the end, Ryan had married Claire Yu, though their affairs had caused endless gossip across the city. Perhaps because Professor Lee knew me best, Ryan had sought him out privately to drink and pour out his heart. He confessed that from the first moment he saw me, he knew I was different. He admitted he had fallen for me long ago, but he could never let go of Claire. He told my professor it was his own fault, that I had been right all along. He was too greedy, wanting both sides, wanting everything. He said that at his mother's 50th birthday banquet, when he heard me truly declare I wanted to break the engagement, he panicked and lashed out, saying in anger that he would marry Claire. He regretted it the instant the words left his mouth. But by the time I graduated, turned away, and left for the Southern Aerospace Base, cutting off all contact and vanishing, he finally realized that his heart had room only for me. Claire, however, seized on his impulsive words, spreading rumors everywhere, creating public pressure. She claimed that Colonel Ryan Lewis had an improper relationship with her. His superior summoned him, warning him to watch his conduct. Forced to give an explanation, he had no choice but to marry her. Yet because of the scandal, Ryan was demoted, stripped of opportunities, and his once bright future collapsed. Claire watched others climb higher while he fell lower, and she often blamed him for being useless. Ryan Lewis became so ill with anger toward his parents that they stopped dealing with him altogether. His PTSD worsened. He and Claire Yu never had children. He grew to hate her. During his episodes, he often hallucinated, and just like in the previous life when he hit Emily, he began striking Claire. The two of them sank into endless petty domestic quarrels. One day, Claire provoked him again, calling him useless. He lost control and struck her, blinding her eye. Someone reported him. Ryan completely lost any chance of moving upward, and was forcibly sent to a rehabilitation facility. Claire and Henry stayed in the old Lewis family home, living off their wealth, ignoring Ryan and his parents. "This is what the Lewis family owes me. They're paying me back," she said. At the institution, in his confusion, Ryan kept murmuring my name. When he had brief moments of clarity, he smashed his own head and cursed himself as damned. For losing a good woman, for losing his chance at happiness. Listening to my professor recount all this, I let out a long sigh. Still, I couldn't help feeling a little pity for Ryan's parents. When I returned to Beijing to visit them, the two were frail and near death. Seeing me, they grasped my hands tightly, cloudy tears streaming down their faces. My eyes grew wet too. But everyone has their own fate, and one can only follow it. As I left their home, I ran into Richard Lee, who had come to visit them. He told me that back then, after introducing me to Ryan Lewis, Ryan had actually been very pleased. Soon afterward, Ryan had helped him return to the city. But Ryan had told him not to tell me. Ryan had wanted to temper me, to make me a better wife for a leader, a daughter-in-law of the Lewis family. He had said 4 years was just right. That together we could repay the debt to James Shao by caring for Claire Yu and Henry. And after those 4 years, he would find another place for them to live so that he and I could finally have our life alone together in the Lewis home. I could only find that laughable. I shook my head. Ryan Lewis never understood me in this life. I had never once thought of clinging to anyone, never dreamed of becoming someone's wife, someone's daughter-in-law, someone's mother. From beginning to end, it had all been his one-sided fantasy. Richard also told me that according to old acquaintances from the village, David Walker had been arrested for running a brothel and had infected Emily with an incurable disease. She could no longer marry again and cried herself to sleep every day, living in misery. She poured all her resentment onto my mother, blaming her for not paving a better path for her. They saw me on television at the National Commendation Ceremony with red flags flying, ribbons swirling, thunderous applause. They could hardly believe their eyes. My mother cried and scolded Emily, saying, "It's your own disobedience that brought you to this misery." She still believed that if Emily had obeyed and married Ryan Lewis, the brilliant life I was living should have belonged to Emily. She didn't understand. In any life, darkness or light, storm or sunshine, you must steer your own ship. Give your course to others and you surrender to fate. The two of them hated me and blamed each other, living out a bitter existence in the village. And me? My life was only just beginning. When my work partner Chiwanjo confessed his admiration for me, I accepted it but made clear to him that I would go on striving for the great dream of national rejuvenation, to leave my own footprints along the path. I was unlikely to be trapped in domestic trivialities or children's entanglements. Chiwanjo nodded and said he understood. He truly admired me and would fully support me. In this life, Sarah belonged to herself. I was my own person. Chiwanjo and I never had children. Together, we devoted our lives to the aerospace cause. Even in recent years, I was still fighting on the front lines. We moved in rhythm with the pulse of our era, pouring ourselves joyfully and fiercely into every new horizon we created. We sweated, we cried, we stood guard through the night and greeted the dawn. We witnessed each attempt to reach for the moon, each trial flight of a soaring swallow. We lifted our eyes to the sky. In this life, I had no regrets. Until one New Year's Eve night, I received a phone call from a convalescent home. An elderly man named Ryan Lewis was at death's door. They said he wanted to see me one last time. For a moment I froze. It was a name from faraway memory. I sighed, asked for Chiwanjo's agreement, and went to see him. Ryan was lying in bed, gaunt and haggard. In a voice that was barely a whisper, he began to speak. "December 7th, 1977, he said. My unit was assigned to protect the security of the first reinstated college entrance exam. I was patrolling the exam hall, and saw a girl trembling with cold, who rushed in at the last second before the test began. She was out of breath, but there was a light in her eyes I'd never seen before. I fell in love with her at first sight. I used everything in my power to bring her to my side. In the previous life, her sister took her place. In this life, it was finally her. But I was afraid she would leave the Lewis family for college, knowing how important university was to her. So I used my position to threaten her not to move out. And at the same time, I feared she would end up like her sister, full of resentment over Claire. So I kept testing her, observing her, pushing her, grinding her down. Ryan's voice grew more agitated, rising and falling, breaking off several times. It was my fault. I did wrong. I was too greedy. I missed her and pushed her away with my own hands. I stared at him in shock. His trembling hand reached out. Sarah, he said. All my life I've wanted to ask you in person. If there had been no Claire back then, would you have chosen me? Would there have been even a tiny chance you would stay and spend your life with me? Before I could answer, his hand fell limp and silent. He was gone. Ryan Lewis died without ever receiving an answer. Until his very last breath, he never understood that the things he couldn't let go of were the very things I no longer cared about in this life. Those blazing rockets shooting into the sky, that boundless starry expanse, they meant more to me than anything. All I felt now was a quiet clarity. None of it had ever truly mattered.